Mary Staret, glad to have you with us here on the Cup of Coffee.
Nice to be here. I have to tell you, I was greeted by a fluffy little white dog named Tomlin, who's wearing a bright orange sweater, and he's been on my lap since I got here, and nothing makes me happier. Plus, I got one of his sweaters that don't fit to take home to my new rescue, so this is turning out to be a great day for me.
You made quite a haul here.
I did. I really did.
I think Tomlin's going to vote for you.
I hope he does. Actually, this dog is very sweet. As soon as I walked in, he came over and he's been on my lap, and he's just awfully sweet.
He's a friendly little guy. So tell us a little bit about yourself. This is interesting for you. You're on that side of the microphone. I've been in radio since high school. 53 years old now. Lost track, but it's always, and I've been interviewed. I've done interviewing more than I've been interviewed, and sometimes, especially when it's been a while since you've been on that side of the mic, it feels different. How is it to you? You're on that side of the mic.
Well, instead of asking the questions, I'm answering the questions these days, but it's pretty good. It feels good. It feels nice. A little bit of background. I've been working for 25 years in network-affiliated TV station broadcasting as a news anchor, a medical reporter. I did a talk show for 12 years, the AM Northwest program, which happens to be the longest-running locally produced talk show in the country. And so with Jim Bosley, I sat next to him for 12 years, but 17 years at KATU television, and then after that worked in local radio as a political talk show host, and then after that worked in a variety of political capacities for the Constitution Party, was very active in Right to Life and a variety of different issues like that. So it's been a very varied career, and now it's time to turn my attention toward what's going on here at home.
Speaking of here at home, and last time you ran for a county commission race in Yamhill County. It was in Yamhill County, correct?
Absolutely.
I've only been here since the 1st of July, so in some ways I'm getting brought back up to speed. But that race was whisker thin last time, wasn't it? Tell us some background of that.
Well, I entered the race and was running against a 2-term incumbent, somebody who had held office for 8 years, and won that race. It was an uncontested primary. Basically, it was me running against a county commissioner who'd been in office for 8 years. And so it was very interesting to see that we wound up winning the race. It was so close that we had to have a recount. They actually recounted by hand every vote. Wound up that I had won the race by 12 votes. But here in Oregon, you have to win by 50% plus 1 vote. Because of all the write-ins, people wrote names like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Those had to actually be counted as votes. And so I wound up, because of those 44 votes, we had to run the race again. And on the runoff, I didn't win. It was very close. But I think this is an entirely different race and an entirely different day.
I hate it when Mickey Mouse messes up the election, don't you?
Yeah, I know.
So let's talk about the issues. And I was reading up a little bit on your position. You want to bring business back to government.
I think what we've seen for too long is career politicians, people who are bureaucrats who've made a career out of working for government. When you've worked for government, you really don't have an idea of what it takes to fill out the bottom line. There's always taxpayer money to do whatever you want to do, typically. When you've worked in the private sector and you've had to make it work, you've worked for yourself, you've had your own business, you've worked in private enterprise, you wind up seeing that if you don't figure it out and you don't make it happen, it's not going to happen. I'm sure with this radio station you see the same thing. There's no big bag of government money to funnel things in when you don't have enough advertising revenue to make your bottom line. So what I believe is we need to see fewer bureaucrats, fewer people who are career politicians, if you will, and more people who've signed the back of a paycheck, not just the front of a paycheck and not just the back of a paycheck. So I like to say more business people in government and less government in people's business. We've seen government pretty much overreach and regulate every aspect of our lives. And I think it's time for us to put the brakes on. And we can probably not make a big difference at the federal level, or maybe not at the state level, where we've just seen an absolute debacle happen, federal and state laws, taxes, regulations. But we can make a difference here at the county level, and that's what I want to do.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So what kind of difference would you make? Are there any changes you would make? What positions, what issues are you concerned about specifically at the county level that you would like to address, and how would you address them?
You know, I think Ronald Reagan said something like, a rising tide lifts all boats. And what that means is when somebody is making money, that money then translates into somebody else making money. If I have a job, I can hire somebody to cut my lawn. I can get a new car. I can shop at local stores. The economy grows when someone is gainfully employed. In this county, we have every resource available to us to make ourselves aggressive and economically viable. That's not the case right now. So instead of looking at what government can do, I think what we need to do is back off and make this a climate that is more conducive to small businesses, home-based businesses, and business and industry moving into our county. And we've got to get aggressive about it. We can't sit back and think it's going to happen if we don't go out looking for that. When you've got more people in Yamhill County paying property taxes, that gives the government a boost. And when you've got a rein on taxes and more of an eye toward helping the guy who's pulling the cart, not all the people in the cart being pulled, the workhorses, if you will, the business people, then you're going to see a real change here.
How do we change that climate?
I think we change the climate by making this, there are some states that businesses want to relocate to, and there are some states that they're fleeing from. Look at what's happening in California. Look at what's happening in New York. But then why are states like, you look at South Dakota, the unemployment rate there is 3%. You look at what's going on perhaps in North Carolina. Different states have different economic climates, a tax base, a tax rate, or incentives, things like that. When people know that Yamhill County is going to be look at what's going on with businesses in Multnomah County. It's impossible to do business in Multnomah County. But when Yamhill County becomes known as the go-to place, that's when things, and they've already changed. Look at what happened in Sheridan.
Okay. There are some people that are going to argue and say, yeah, but we can't change it because we're dealing with Oregon state law, and some of the Oregon state laws we can't change. We have to just play by the rules. What would you say to that?
Well, absolutely. We've got federal and state rules and laws and regulations that unfortunately are an overlay on top of what we need to do here in this county. But if you look at how counties are different, it is because how their administration, and because if they've got pushback, or if they've got an eye toward changing things that they can change. We do have some control, we do have some independence and some sovereignty, and that we have to maintain.
Why vote for Mary as opposed to Deborah?
Well, Mary Staret has a very varied track record in terms of not only career, not only training, not only different issues that I've been involved in at the community level, but not to disparage bureaucrats or not to disparage people who've made government their career. I do think that sometimes that brings in a complacency. When you've got somebody who brings new eyes to it, you've got a whole different set of in other words, you've got a whole different set of expectations. Someone who's been in government for a while only expects things to be the way government has always been. I look at things differently, and I want to see the way things can be, not the way they've always been done. I also have a belief that we need less government, more accountable government. I think we need to put the taxpayer first. And I do believe that these are things that can be done, but we need to get government out of people's business.
How do we make less government in Yamhill County?
Well, I think what we do is we make the government that exists, we make it run leaner, and we need to be a little bit more creative in how we solve our problems. I'm always of the belief that government sometimes is the problem and not the solution. So what I like to do, and what I've done in my life, is to look at how the community and faith-based organizations can take over where government cannot and has not been successful. For instance, I'm involved in Christian family adoptions, and what we do is we try to get kids in state foster care into permanent placement. The government cannot do that. What we do is we have a foster mentorship program, so I have become a foster mentor. If we cannot bring foster children in or adopt children, we can keep them from going on to lives of drug abuse and crime by intervening and becoming a mentor in their lives. This is not something done at the government level. This is what we do in the community. When we've got people who have issues with drug and alcohol abuse, we need to step in, not only the faith-based community, but the community at large, and say, well, government isn't going to be able to fix all these problems. What are we going to do? And that's where we have to start thinking a little more creatively than we have been.
So what you're saying is create more partnerships with maybe nonprofits, charity, and faith-based organizations, for example, in what you were talking about?
Yes, and I think we need to engage people. People are very intimidated by government. There seems to be an awful lot of us versus them. I'm in government, I know better, I know what to do. Well, to be perfectly honest, I would rather take my advice and my counsel from people who are in the community, not only the faith-based community, but the business community, and incorporate them into the decisions that the county makes.
What are you hearing from the electorate? What are you hearing from the street? And we've been hearing some interesting comments after the recent elections. There's a lot of money issues, especially school districts failed in this last election. It seems to be, at least from our vantage point, a little bit of a pushback from people are pretty much throw the bums out. You're not getting any more of my money. And we point to the national government shutdown, the federal government shutdown. That didn't do a lot for the credibility of government everywhere. Would you agree with that?
Well, the government shutdown to me was pretty much smoke and mirrors. Really, government continued to operate, and government waste continued to be at all-time high levels. What I have been hearing, is that people are fed up with government intrusion into our lives. People are now coming to realize that all of these things that they were told about, government spying on them and government doing dishonest things, has come to pass. We're seeing it in front of us that we cannot trust government at the national level. We know we cannot, in many cases, abide by the waste that happens at the state level. I think by and large, our county is above and beyond reproach. There are things that can be changed, but we really do have some good people in government. We have some great people at the administrative level, and I'm really proud of that. And I'd like to see that continue. But you're right. People are pushing back and saying, I'm not giving you any more taxpayer money because the money I give you isn't being used appropriately, and your programs are not successful. So yeah, they're saying, I don't want to give you any more of my money. I don't trust you. Who can blame people? That's where we need to show them that it's different here.
One of the things, now Sam Adams spoke to the McMinnville City Club the other day. I don't agree with a lot of what Sam Adams did. No, we're not related, by the way. But what he was saying was that government has to learn that there's not going to be this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. In other words, there's not a lot of money to draw from. Governments are going to have to realize that they're going to have to make do with existing pools of resources, revenue and otherwise, and possibly reallocate and look for opportunities for a dollar to do two different things. In other words, multitask your money and understand that you're going to have to be very efficient in the use of your resources, because there's not this huge pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. In other words, more money to be had.
Well, that's interesting coming from Sam Adams, who never saw a tax or regulation or an infringement that he didn't want to bring into the city. But what I will say is that we are now seeing that we are going to have to do more with less. And as I said in an article, in an interview in the News Register recently, we are now at the point where that's not debatable. There's no negotiation there. We have less, and we are being asked to do more. You've got more people who are going to need help with medical care. Now that we've got the debacle coming from Washington, D.C. called Obamacare, it's going to trickle down to Yamhill County, and we are going to have to figure out how to extricate ourselves from that mess. We are seeing more and more people, unfortunately, in this state and in this county who are victims of not only illegal drugs, but prescription drug abuse. We've got a 5-fold increase in hospitalizations and deaths of people from prescribed drugs. So I don't care where you're getting your drugs, from a doctor with a white coat and a stethoscope or a guy with a hoodie on the corner. When you're addicted, you are not only a drain on society, but it is another lost soul. We need to get in there and fix the problem before people become addicted, because illegal drugs are a absolute scourge on the county, and we've got to jump in and intervene.
Let's talk about that. How do we do that? That's a tall order. It needs to be done. I think we both agree on that. What do we do?
Well, again, I go back to, for instance, here's a program that deals with foster mentorship, and having gone through the foster mentorship training, what we're finding is that a lot of the kids, a lot of the people who wind up in prison or wind up out on the streets involved in illegal drug trade and addicted are people who came from the foster care system who really don't have any base, any structure, any family. So where do they go? Where can they go? You and I are used to having parents who we could, run home to if things got bad. These kids have nowhere to go. So if we can keep them from getting out on the street, winding up dealing drugs or being addicted to drugs, that's one huge, you've got 1,500 kids now in the foster care system ready for adoption. Actually, they're out of the foster system, but ready for adoption. If we can get half of those kids before they turn to drugs and crime, think about what a difference that's going to make in our community.
One of the things interesting point you make there, when I was in Bend, there was a lot of homeless teenagers in Bend, because what they would do is they would hook the train from Bend or from Portland and come down to Bend, because they told me, and we went out and interviewed them. We did some MOS, man on the street, going out and talking to these kids. And what they would do is they would congregate in groups, not gangs, but groups, and they would do that for their safety, for their own safety. And they would leave Portland and go to places like Bend because they thought there was more money in Bend, because Bend, at least for a while, had a reputation of being where the rich people were. So where they would go down there and do what's called spange, which is they would beg for money. And so you see a lot of these homeless kids on the street. But it was safer to live on the street in Bend than Portland.
We've got a real homeless problem here, especially
in Yamhill County.
I'm talking what you talk about,
Bend
particularly
and Portland, yeah.
in the Portland area. Well, there's homelessness in every county. Yamhill County certainly is no exception. But the metropolitan areas where services are, you tend to see more congregation of people. But I actually remember working with a ministry where we would take bags of lunches down to Pioneer Courthouse Square, and you see all these kids who had made families of other homeless kids, and this had become their family. Unfortunately, their families were involved in drug, alcohol abuse, and crime, and it was very difficult to reach them. But we did reach them at where they were hungry. We gave them something to eat, and from there they were able to hear a message of, there's another way out of this, and there are resources, and we really have to be open to being creative and not looking for government to make sure there are no homeless people, no drug addicts, because that's not going to happen. It hasn't happened.
One of the things that Suzanne Bonamici had a town hall meeting in just north of here about a month ago. And this was right after the government went back to work. They shut down, the government went back, and then she came back and held, I believe, 4 town halls. One of the things and she had her say, and one of the things I absolutely love to do is go talk to the people in the audience. Okay, what did you think about what was said? And I did find 2 people that said it's okay to raise taxes to fix the problem. A lot of the majority of the people I talked to said that's not the answer. But they also said the majority of the people I talked to didn't like what they were hearing. And this is not to run down Suzanne Bonamici, but people are not happy right now.
Well, Suzanne Bonamici and people in that, that sort of political ideology, again, never met a tax that they didn't like. The answer is always to raise taxes or inflict more regulation on people. And the more government has access to money, the more there's the potential for waste. So no, I think there's got to come a point where we say taxes are not going to be raised. And the way I look at it is, as commissioner, there just doesn't seem to me to be any reason to raise taxes when we have there are cubby holes that can be accessed to access more funds, and there has to be a smarter way in doing government, and continuing to say that we're going to be able to throw money after every problem. It's not going to happen.
It's just not the money out there, not the extra money.
No.
Just say yes to taxes to a lot of, especially business people, are saying that's not the answer, because they're seeing their bottom line going down. To a lot of business people, it's a perfect storm where revenue is down because people are spending less money, And then in many cases, cost of doing business is up, cost of goods is up, transportation is up. Thankfully, gas prices have gone down recently. And then when you have extra government regulation or additional government regulation, that's an extra cost. Talked to a lot of business people that, especially in the Bend area, that would, some of them were going down to Texas. They didn't have the land use planning laws down there. They had more wide open spaces. North Dakota, South Dakota is a great place to go if you're looking for a job in the oil fields, especially because the unemployment rate there is 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Lowest in the nation, and they're building like crazy down there. But a lot of people don't want to go to North Dakota. They like the beaches of Oregon, and they're willing to put up with it. I asked some business people in Central Oregon. I talk about that because I was there for 6 years as a reporter. Why do you stay in Oregon? Why do you stay in the Bend area? And they said, this is our home. We like it here, and we're going to find some way to make our business stick. So people like it here. They want to do business here. I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit here, but when people say Oregon is business friendly, let me ask you this question. Do you think Oregon is business friendly?
No, I do not.
I would have to agree with you, and I would have to say I've talked to a lot of people that say the same thing because of the regulation, because of the cost of doing business. Also talked to a number of municipalities, not going to mention names. It's not the local area I'm at now, but previous areas. They were afraid of City Hall because of retribution. And it was amazing that in some of the small towns in Oregon, there's this us versus them mentality. And I saw it, and it just shocked the heck out of me.
You know, last time I was running, I saw something similar to that, and it surprised me because I would have thought that in small towns and small cities you'd have more of a community feel, a compassion for the business person. But when I see people that are going after businesses because of sign regulations, because of anything that they're trying to do to increase their business, and they make it difficult, and just some of the land use situations going on in different cities, I got to tell you, I was really, really surprised to see the backbiting that went on in the small towns and some of the political infighting, and it got down and dirty.
Mm-hmm. For example, in one of the cities, you couldn't put a sign on the inside glass of your window facing out if you were a business. That's ridiculous. You know,
it is ridiculous, and we have to ask, what is my business, and where do you cross the line that says you cannot tell me what to do inside this business, short of anything that's illegal, because right. I believe that if it's illegal, we need to keep to the law. But when you start making rules and regulations about whether people can hang a sign or put a sandwich board out on the street telling people their business is there, everything is better when business people make more money. We got to make it easier for them, not harder.
I would totally agree. So why, as we close it, is there anything you'd like to ask before I ask the final question, which is the final question will be, why vote for Mary Staret for Yamhill County Commissioner? But before we do that, let me give you a chance to talk about something maybe we haven't visited about yet that you would like to bring up in the campaign.
I think there are a lot of issues that we're going to be talking about in the next few months. I think it's important for people to realize that the difference between electing a bureaucrat and electing somebody from the private sector is that you're going to get more of the same. This is not to disparage bureaucrats. This is not to disparage people who work in government and have their whole lives. What it is to say is that there comes a time where we have to say, business people in government gets government out of people's business, and that's the difference between myself and my opponent. And again, this is not to disparage anybody who works in government, but I think we've passed the time to start thinking about that.
So why vote for Mary Staret?
Vote for Mary Staret because I believe that the core functions of government have to be paid for before we start paying for things we can't afford. To raise taxes is just lunacy in this political climate and in this economic climate, and that businesses and taxpayers need to be able to rely on the fact that I'm going to have their back when it comes to representing them at county government, and to make sure that nothing is happening that they're not aware of.
Let me follow that up. What kinds of things should government pay for?
Government should pay for the basics, and that is we need to have our sheriff's department so that they can be arresting drug dealers and pedophiles and violent criminals. They need to be funded. That's a core function of government. Infrastructure, roads and streets and sewers and water and things like that, that's a core function of government. Administration, collecting property taxes and protecting private property rights. Those are core functions of government, and we need to be looking towards those who are most vulnerable. We need to look to how we can better help them without piling on the taxpayer.
This isn't a function of local governments, more state and federal government, but the issue of health care. How does the government fit in that equation? It's a dialogue that we're all going to be having, that we're all going to have. And, I'll share something about that in just a moment. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, we're seeing what's happening with the Affordable Care Act, which has turned out to be anything but affordable for people losing their insurance and having their premiums go up. So when the government gets involved in health care, look at what's happening at the federal level. Look at what's happening at the state level. What we need to do at the county level is do what we can with the regulations and the mandates that have landed in our laps, sadly. And I think we can do that by going back to more of a community model of health care. But that being said, we are going to have to deal with the ramifications of Obamacare, whether we like it or not, here in Yamhill County, and we better start thinking about some solutions now.
Along those lines, and I'm not going to mention, I'm going to get in trouble here, but that's okay. I've done it before, I'll do it again. And I'm not going to mention the business that I'm shopping for healthcare right now. And so I got some quotes from an agency. I'm not going to tell you who it is or where it is. But some of the premiums that I'm looking at here, I'm looking at for coverage for little old me, 53-year-old man who has had some. I'm not going to go over my health history over the air, but I'm looking at premiums of $300 a month, $500 a month.
Well, my husband and I are paying $1,500 a month, and that is for a $10,000 deductible. And so that's gone up a couple of $100 in the last few months. It's probably going to go up again if we're not canceled, because everyone's finding out that their insurance policy is, in many cases, not acceptable under Obamacare. So much for the promises that were made. And unfortunately, we're going to see that trickle down to the county level with people who are going to be needing some health care.
Interesting times we're in.
Yes, they are very interesting, and we were told that we were going to be living in interesting times, and we are living in them right now.
And what's that old saying? May you live in interesting times.
Yep.
Well, the train has arrived, and it's going to be very interesting. I think we're going to have to think a lot outside the box. And the answer of, we've always done it that way, not going to cut it anymore.
No, because we've already done it that way, and how do we like what we've gotten?
How's that working for you,
How's that working for us?
Yeah, not working too well. I remember, how many years ago was this? I remember working at a station in Ontario, Oregon. It was KSRV, and we had group health insurance, and I was paying for a family, and this must have been maybe 20 years ago. Okay, so it was quite a while ago. But I remember, I don't have the pay slip anymore, but I remember paying $30 a month, $30 a month for a family health care policy with Blue Cross of Oregon, and it was a good policy, major medical, and you go to the doctor and you'd pay $10 on a copay, and you'd pay $30 for the month, and times were good back then. And now I'm looking at a proposed plan here for a $564 policy premium 1 month for Mr. Dave. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a $500 bill floating around saying spend me on a health insurance premium.
Well, and then when you look at what the deductible is too, then it's not something. It's something that's going to have some pretty severe ramifications all across the board. And for those people who have looked to government to fix everything, those who thought that this Affordable Care, government taking over our health care was going to be a good thing, I think that it's long past the time to think that government's going to solve our problems. It's not. We're going to solve our problems. And if we don't do it, we're going to get the government that we deserve, and we're already starting to see we have.
Do you have Facebook or a way for people, the voters,
yes,
to touch base with you?
Just go to Facebook, go to Mary Staret for Commissioner. And it's on Facebook, and say hi there, and I'll get back to you. And we've got a website in production right now, and we're going to get that up anytime soon.
Okay. Well, Tomlin is there and wants to say goodbye to you. Here
This
in just
little
a moment.
dog might go home with me today because he's just adorable.
Tomlin is like a little old man in a white furry suit, and this dog has got mega personality.
Just a lover. He is just so affectionate, and he's a wonderful addition to your radio station. I have to tell you, he's a great greeter.
Yes, when he gets on if you come to the radio station, Tomlin barks at you. Don't worry, he won't bite you. He just wants to lick you to death. And but he's our little old man in the white doggy suit with 4 legs, and I think I swear there's a little guy running around in there somewhere. So Mary, thank you. We are going to be having all of the candidates back again. We've got plenty of time to do that, and so we'll be having you again as we get closer to the race and talk about the issues, especially as other questions I'm sure will come up, other campaign issues will come up specific to the Yamhill County Commission race.
It's been fun, Dave. Thanks so much.
And thank you. Tomlin, thanks you as well. AM 1260 KLYC. If you have something you would like us to talk about on Cup of Coffee, it's Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 8:30. 2 segments, generally 7:30 to 8 to 8:30. Send me an email, news@klyc.us, or call the station. Call the station at 472-1260, 472-1260. Also, a lot going on. Dayton, we're going to be following them Friday night. Listen for coverage of that. Hopefully they'll continue on and win the state championship. Go Dayton Pirates. And if you have somebody you would like to nominate for a Your Day, this is your day, then let us know about it. And likewise, send it to news@klyc.us or yourday@klyc.us. Today is Kathy Robinson Day on AM 1260 KLYC.